today, like every other, is important. Chris Clem spent 27 and a half years in federal law enforcement. He was a chief patrol agent, supporting law enforcement, first responders, and veterans. U.S. Border Patrol out of Sam Houston State University. That's the short version. He's spent a life at the border, and he knows what's going on down there, and the chaos and the trends from the time that he started in the mid-90s to now. It's changed a lot. He's had a front row seat, and I think that needs to be listened to. I think we need to understand what the Border Patrol is going through, what they see, and he's got a lot of perspective on this. He knows there are criminals coming through. He also knows there are necessary workers coming through and families coming through. So he sees this from a lot of different angles, and we're going to get his position on it and talk about what can be done to stem the tide of chaos. This is hurting people on both sides of the border. We'll hear from Chief Chris Clem next.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya Podcast.
Meanwhile, are you one of the millions of Americans, I'm talking about men and women of any age, who are dealing with premature hair loss, or your hair is just thinning out and you're scared because you know it runs in the family and you might inherit that gene? Well, finally, there's a real solution that delivers on its promise without the harsh side effects, without the awful smell, and without unwanted chemicals. And it's brought to us by our friends that developed Genucel Skincare. This is Provia. It uses safe, natural ingredients, and one in particular called Procapil, to effectively target the three main causes of premature hair thinning and loss. By supporting healthy scalp circulation, the delivery of nourishing nutrients, and healthy hair follicle anchoring to your scalp, Provia guarantees more hair on your head than in the drain or on your comb. Now, it is effective for men and women of any age. It's safe on colored hair, treated hair, styled hair. It's that easy. And right now, new customers save over 50% off Provia's introductory package at proviahair.com/Michele. It's PROVIA hair.com/Michele. Every package includes a full 60-day supply of Provia serum for daily use, plus Provia 30 super concentrate for faster, more noticeable results. Provia works. It's guaranteed, or 100% of your money back. See results for yourself right now. Don't wait. Why would you? proviahair.com/Michele. Provia, PROVIA hair.com/Michele with one L. proviahair.com/MICHELE. Your law enforcement. Yeah. You're leaving the house every day, whatever time you leave, and she's sitting there going, please come home, you know? Yeah. So I would imagine, I mean, right? Is that a fair assessment, or is what you do safer than your average law enforcement?
Well, I think that's a fair assessment for any spouse of law enforcement, firefighter, first responder, military, because you don't know. You know, you kiss your wife and kids goodbye in the morning, and you hope it's going to be a good day. I can tell you that what Border Patrol agents do versus what like domestic police force, city police do, completely different. Yeah. I would not. I'll just say it like what a city cop has to endure every day. I mean, it's nonstop calls, domestic violence, sexual assaults, burglary, shots fired, things like that. I mean, it is wearing on them. They have a different response in the sense that there's a lot more of them in an area where there may be like for the city of New York, there's like 40,000 police officers. Well, I have,
and probably still not enough, by the way, and right. Not getting the support from their sure. City officials that they should be getting.
Right. But the point I was going to make is that there's a lot of backup pretty close, right? So you have more people going into a call. If you get into a situation, you're usually seconds to minutes away. In the Border Patrol, like I said, there was 20 of us covering 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, so 8-hour, 10-hour shifts. I may have backup an hour away. There were Michele. This is 100% fact. There were times where backup would be an hour and a half to 2 hours away, depending on where we were. So the decisions we had to make, whether we were going to respond to a sensor immediately or wait to see if a vehicle was showing up, right. Following something, working a trail where you're going to get out there and start tracking a group of 10 people when you're by yourself if your backup was an hour away. These are decisions that Border Patrol have to face even to this day in some of our remote areas. And so those challenges are a lot different. And I will say this too, because it goes back to what the spouses think, is most of the time we don't know who we are dealing with until we already have apprehended them, got them to a station, and done initial biographic information. So they could be in our custody for several hours before we find out this person was a MS-13 gang member, known cop killer, or a terrorist, or just somebody looking for work. Where in the domestic policing, that they generally know the residents, they have a call sheet, they know what to expect sometimes, not all the time. And I don't want to discredit our men and women that do it domestically in the cities and in the counties, but we don't know who we're dealing with because they're coming from another country.
Right.
So that just weighs on the spouses.
I'm sure it does. And I'm sure it kind of weighs on you as well. There has been so much that has happened. And as you said, you've spent 27 and a half years in this career. Over the course of that time, has it been sort of up and down, and there have been surges and then back offs and then surges? Have there been turning points? Has it been just a hockey stick increase? How would you describe what you've seen over the course of those decades in terms of the amount of activity that the Border Patrol has had to respond to?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, and it really kind of tells a tale of what we're up against from a national security and border security perspective. Immigration and specifically illegal immigration has been cyclical for decades. I mean, you can go back and you can see it was when the majority of the people we were encountering were adult Mexican males coming over here for basically doing agriculture and labor work. You knew when it was planting season because you had a rise in immigration. And those people were generally, if they were not involved in any kind of clandestine operations, smuggling, they were just coming to field workers. They would be arrested. They would be voluntarily returned back to Mexico, and they try again another day. That was seasonal, and you could predict that. And over the last decade, you'd hear some advocates talk about seasonal trends. That's kind of how it was in the early late 70s, early 80s, when we had a big amnesty because we didn't get rid of people. And then the way the laws changed in the 90s and mid 90s, it was still based on a seasonal immigration flow. Then tragedy struck the world, specifically United States, on 9/11, and that's when people kind of focused on, hey, there is a bad side to immigration or illegal immigration, and President Bush began addressing it. We created the Homeland Security. And then we started focusing on what's coming in at the borders because we realized that we have not strengthened the things that we should have strengthened. It was probably in about the beginning of President Obama's second term, so 2012, when the big talk about comprehensive immigration reform. You want to secure the border first, and then we're going to get immigration reform. And in 2014, I was assigned to Washington, D.C. I was an assistant chief or associate chief up there. And we just had a huge surge of unaccompanied children, minors. From months old to 17, they were just coming in illegally, and it was crazy.
So what was behind that?
It was decades of people coming in and kind of being unchecked. We were not doing the things that we needed to do, and so they started trying to connect. It was kind of like, let's get the kids here. Let's get them sponsored. Then right behind them came the family, like the moms and dads saying, hey, well, our kid is with a sponsor somewhere. We need to be let go. This all happened in 2014 and 15 was the first surge that we had seen in really kind of go back 20, 30 years that was not tied to a seasonal immigration agricultural trend. These were not people coming to pick, crops in the Southwest and then moving to tobacco in the East. No, this was families coming in here to try to gain some kind of relief and a foothold in the United States. And it hasn't changed since. It went in 14, 15, it was kids and families, and they were mainly Mexico and Central Americans. In 18 and 19, it was again Central Americans, families, and then the single adults started showing up. And then over the last 2 years, it's been, you name it. I was the chief in Yuma in fiscal year 2022. We had 116 different countries. Mexico and Central America didn't even make my top 10 most of the time. It was a world problem. Border Patrol apprehended, I think, people from over 140 different countries last year. So this is no longer a seasonal agricultural, we need labor workers. This is people coming in, trying to take advantage of a system. There are some people that really need relief because they truly are suffering. And then there's a lot of them that are just trying to take advantage of what this great country offers.
We'll get into that more after this quick break, because I think that increase is so marked. And I was looking at the numbers this morning, starting with fiscal year 2022. We know that in 2020, the world really shut down. And so the numbers decreased dramatically, but that's easy to see why that was. There was a shutdown. We weren't allowing people to come into this country through most means. So, but starting in 2021 and 2022, we have seen astronomical rises in these confrontations. We're going to get into that right after this. All right, Chief Clem.
Yeah.
So we had COVID. Everything really slowed down. The whole world really came to a stop. At what point? So look, we had the 2020 election. We know that the previous president, Donald Trump, was big into the border. He wanted a wall. He wanted more resources to protect the southern border. I'm not quite sure if anything really changed at the northern border, but now even the northern border is looking sketchy. Right. How would you describe a moment of change between the time that Trump left office and Joe Biden came in?
Well, that was something that is going to take a few minutes to describe, but I'll just say it was controlled chaos from the beginning of when he started doing executive orders to stop some things that were already in place. We have to go back, and I think it's very important to recognize that starting with President Clinton, you go back to the 1994 crime bill where he put 5,000 police officers on the streets. That included Border Patrol agents. I was hired under that 1994 crime bill. You go back to the late Representative Barbara Jordan, who was speaking on immigration reform and talked about the balance that we needed about securing our border and then finding better ways to lawfully immigrate those that need to come into the country. So you had a bipartisan effort in 1994 and 1995. Again, after 9/11 under President Bush, we really pushed to securing our borders. Obama was trying to get, hey, let's do a little balance. Let's keep securing the border. Let's get the border under control, but let's find a way to help people in. President Trump came in, especially as he was candidate Trump, marketing, securing that border, building that wall. I mean, we've all heard the phrase, look, I'm all for walls where they make sense. It is proven. It is proven wherever you have infrastructure in the form of whether it's a wall or roads or access to secure our border, it works. We had built a great plan. It was experts. It wasn't politicians. It wasn't Washington bureaucrats design. It was Border Patrol agents. It was chiefs like me and real agents on the ground doing, say, hey, this is what we need, that built this plan in place. And while some of the policies under President Trump were, I'd like to describe them as clunky, but they were effective. Like they could have been, because they were done so quickly to basically, stop a leaking dam. And then under President Biden, it was just, it was just basically done away with a few executive orders. No more wall. Everything was going to be revisited. They reversed some policies, and it went from. I'll just give you some numbers, and I'll let the viewers and listeners tell the story in their own minds. In October of 2021, 2020, excuse me, Yuma was apprehending 25 people a day. That's, we had 8,800 arrests in fiscal year 20. October of 2020, 25 arrests a day. November, it went up to 34 a day. In December, it was 54 a day. In January, it was in the upper 70s. By May, so fast forward, after President Biden's taken over, we were at 500 a day. We averaged over 1,000 a day. We went from 8,800 arrests in 2020 to 114,000 arrests in 2021 to over 310,000 arrests in fiscal year 22 in one sector in Yuma, Arizona. So you tell me what changed. And it was basically executive orders that said, we're not going to do this. And the transition teams, every administration, there's a change. There's a transition team and everything policy to include border security. And there were warnings. Look, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. Give us some time. Let's work through this thing. And it just didn't happen. It fell on deaf ears. And look, it took 18 months. It took 18 months for me as a sitting chief, the national chief, Senator Kelly from Arizona, Ambassador Ken Salazar, the first ambassador under President Biden to Mexico, to convince the department and the White House to build like 1,000-foot a wall over in Yuma to protect lives. I mean,
why did it take that long?
Because of politics. I mean, we're talking about saving lives. Water and people trying to cross legally do not mix. And we had an area where there was a gap at the Morales Dam where people were coming in. It was putting our agents at risk. It was putting the migrants at risk. It was putting the community at risk because that's their big agriculture fields there. And it needed to be done. I mean, literally 150 yards from where they stopped constructing is a marshaling area where piles and piles of steel were stacked up just to close that 1,000-foot gap. It took 18 months to get them to agree to do it. And it's still finally being completed now. I mean, they didn't start construction.
It's still in progress now.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And we already look, I have said this before, and it's kind of been a little catchphrase of mine lately, is we should be a country of tall fences and wide gates. Tall fences to secure our border. National security should not be a partisan issue. It should be in every American's best interest, because without it, every town in the country becomes a border town. And the wide gates are the ports of entry. Let people that are entitled to come over here or need to come over here go through the right process, do it the lawful way, because nowhere else in this world or in this country can you just get in front of the line just because you said so. And that's very frustrating. It's very frustrating on the workforce because they had seen. I mean, again, look at those numbers: 8,800 arrests, which that's fun for us. I mean,
and I'm wondering how you manage that with a limited. Like, did the Border Patrol grow to counter that? I mean, as you have this massive increase in people trying to cross the border, did you have a similar massive increase in resources and people to handle it?
No, quite the opposite, right? There was a lot of people that were retirement eligible that decided to go ahead and, it wasn't worth it for them. They'd done their time and, go out on their own terms. One thing you mentioned that I wanted to make sure that everybody understood is when the world was shutting down because of COVID and all the pandemic things put in place, Border Patrol didn't stop. We were still out there doing our job, encountering people from all over the world. We were kind of like, and I don't want to make light of this virus because we know so many people died from it, but we were just glad there was a name to something that we were exposed to, because honestly, when you catch people from all over the world that are not necessarily have immunizations and whatnot, we're dealing with that. We're their first person they may encounter. And so we put all our personal protective equipment on. We went out there and did this. But we had been, our numbers for years was 21,370. That was what we were congressionally appropriated for. We got really close to that mark. And it's only dwindled down. I think our numbers now are just under 19,000. So we've actually
we are short staffed at the border is what you're saying. Bottom line is we are short staffed at the border, and we have a massive influx of people. As you said, some of them should probably come in, but you know what? You got to get in line like anywhere else, like at the grocery store, like at the airport, like anywhere else. And there's a lot of, listen, you're retired now, right? You don't have an affiliation with the government. Right. What do you think is the motivation of this White House to allow this?
I've never been one to kind of put on a conspiracy theory head when I think about things. And a lot of it starts to kind of make sense. Like, why are they doing this, right? My first inclination is because the former President Trump did it. And there's so much of that. We're just going to try to erase history, anything.
In other words, they were so anti-Trump and so everything about him, and so that they just had to undo everything that he did. It's the same you could say about the Keystone XL pipeline. That was one of the first things, right? So that this is another example of let's just undo whatever the previous president did.
And that's I firmly believe that. There are good people working in this administration that I know that are equally frustrated because they mean well, and they want to do right. But, look, change the name of the policy, if that's what you want to do, but don't get rid of it. Cause it's putting people in harm's way, and not just
right.
Americans, but the people. This is when we
The
say
migrants.
this. Look what happened in Juarez 2 days ago when that's a migrant camp. These people didn't leave; they got burned up. That's crazy.
I want to go into that story because I wanted to get your response to that. A couple days ago, 39 people at last count died in a fire because some people were ticked off that they were going to be deported, so they set this place on fire. What do you know about the circumstances and the aftermath of all that?
Well, I will tell you this. I don't know all the specific details. I don't have access to that anymore. But I can tell you how we got to that point. So we do know that the president finally made a trip down the border, and it brought some attention to the issue to the extent that the administration will give it attention. And so there's been some changes in what countries can come in, and Title 42 is still there. So the numbers at large across the border kind of went down a little bit. We had a little lull. It's still at an all-time high. It's kind of like them saying our gas prices are decreasing. Yeah. Well, they're still $2 higher than they've ever been, right? So
they condition you to the worst, the extremes, so that a little bit less than extreme seems like it's an improvement.
Yeah, yes, that's absolutely right. So the migrants, they haven't come in at the same rate, but they didn't leave anywhere. They stayed in northern Mexico. So they stayed in places like Juarez. I mean, those that aren't familiar with Ciudad Juarez, it's the border town with El Paso. Ciudad Juarez and El Paso is like the largest international city in the world. When you combine both sides of the border there, you're talking several million people right there in an area. And so they have a lot of resources. They have all the shelters and nonprofits working in Juarez. So they built these migrant shelters, and this is where these people were staying because a lot of them were making entries and they were getting pushed back by the Border Patrol. Yeah. And so
again, this is south. This is south. I just want to clarify for people. This is south of the border in Mexico, very close to the border. This happened. Go ahead.
Yes, it's right there in Juarez, Mexico, within probably a stone's throw of the border. And Mexico was saying you can't stay here anymore. And they were not letting them leave. And so several of them started protesting. And through their protest, they lit some mattresses on fire. Well, that created the blaze that ended up taking so many lives. And this is, again, goes back to a hemispheric, basically a world immigration problem that is starts with people thinking they have the right to come here however they please. And so this is, again, another tragedy that's a result of us not standing firm and sending a message around the world that you cannot come in here because you want to. You can only come over here through a process. And one other thing too is we no longer have that same standing with Mexico. I will tell you this: that I went under President Trump, when I would be meeting with Mexican officials, it was, "What do you need, Chief?" Now it was like, well, Chief, we're not really going to be able to do that. So we lost that footing. Like we are not in the same, I would say, bargaining
and
position.
Why do you think that is? It's just this is a change in president. So do you think that the relationship is different? They also have a different president in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So do you think that it's a change in the dynamic of those two leaders, or is it a change in the dynamic of the policies that have been stripped? What do you think that's about?
Well, I will say this, that Obrador, AMLO was there, when Trump was there, and, established some firm rules here. Look, if you don't stop this, we're going to shut down ports. He created Mexico created their own National Guard to help us with humanitarian. So between it was truly a whole of government. We hear a lot of people throw out this whole of government approach. That was probably the best whole of government approach we ever had. Department of State, Department of Homeland Security working with Mexico, Congress, and both Congresses were working to establish things to secure the border. Look, a secure border is beneficial to both countries. It keeps people safe, which allows lawful trade and travel and a healthy world. An unsecure border creates chaos at the border. Like you had 1,000 people rushing those same ports of entry 2 weeks ago. You had people dying in a shelter. It's incredible. And back to the question is, I think it was a different about an intestinal fortitude from one leader holding another one accountable to now they're just kind of like, all right, fine. I mean, think about it. You got Congressman Crenshaw trying to say, hey, we need to address the cartels. And he's getting attacked by Mexican leadership. Look, this is crazy. The cartels are controlling everything along this border. It's not even in our National Defense Authorization Act to address this huge threat. And you're seeing it play out in what's happening in our border and the influence it has on the governments there in Mexico. And the thing is the Mexican people are beautiful people. They're a wonderful culture. They have so much to give, and they're just being hijacked by poor politics and the cartel violence and
the cartels, and I wish we would get a spine about this. Maybe say we're going to put a moratorium on travel to Mexico, really hit their tourism. I mean, I still have so many friends that are going to Mexico for spring break. And I think to myself, why would you do that? Why would you give your money to this country that is really so lax in the way that they support this border and allow the cartels to run them into the ground? Before we let you go, what are the answers?
A couple things. I can't let this go because this is an opportunity here. When you go back a month ago when we had those Americans killed by the cartel when they went down into South Texas, I think they went to get a medical procedure. The cartels apologized for doing that. We haven't gotten an apology from the administration of what they've done to this country in regards to the chaos at the border, and that's a sad state of affairs. And that's one of the things that I think it frustrates a lot of people is it's playing out right in front of us, and it's hitting us in so many ways that it's very frustrating. The answer, a couple things. We do need some firm policy decisions, and that's another interesting piece because now this administration is blaming Congress when they were in charge of the House and Senate. They didn't do a thing. They just blame the president. Now they've switched that narrative back to Congress. Congress loves to kick the can because it's emotional. They conflate immigration with border security, which we need a separate border security bill that focuses strictly on securing the border, and then let the socioeconomic experts deal with immigration. We need business.
It seems to me, sorry to interrupt you. I want to get back to that. You were, let's remember you were about to say we need business. Hang on. When you hear this term that they love to throw around in Washington, we need a comprehensive approach. That seems to me to be saying we're not going to do a damn thing until we're happy with every aspect of this. And it is full instead of solving each individual problem in a way that, no, we can't do that until we get this and this and this. No, why? Why not secure the border first and then work on the rest afterward?
Well, you would do that everything else in your life, right? Whether it's paying off debt or fixing a leaky roof, right? You turn the water off and then you patch the roof and then you keep the water running, right?
Yes.
Comprehensive when you hear it from the Beltway is kicking the can is what that is. Because we've been kicking that can for decades.
And is that because it is emotional, like you described, like or is this also, I hate to be so cynical, but is this a great fundraising issue for both sides?
I think it's probably a little bit of everything, right? If you can continue to campaign on and say, well, if they would just sign that bill, but I'm going to do it next time and we'll get it done. So it can be a fundraising issue. But look, I think it's important to separate our immigration process because we do need workers. We need smart people here. We need to continue this. We're a country founded on immigration. We get that, right? Of course, there's good immigration, then there's the bad immigration that impacts our security and creates the vulnerabilities, brings in the bad people and the bad things. I think that if we would just focus on not conflating the two and say, look, security is important. Think about this. You have a lock on your bathroom door, in your bedroom that has a lock on the door, to your front door that has a lock on the door. But we don't want to build a security around our country. That's crazy.
So there seems to be an uptick in the coverage of the illegal immigration at the southern border, but it's taken a long time. As I mentioned in a moment ago, 2.75, 2.76 million illegal immigrant crossings have been recorded in fiscal year 2022, which just recently ended. Almost 3 million people. And that does not include the gotaways. And who are the gotaways? You can have a big heart. You can be compassionate. You can want people to come to this country. And all of those things are fine. but there should be a process, and it shouldn't look like what it looks like now. And let's be clear about this, and let's be honest about this, that this tide began rolling in when Joe Biden stepped into the Oval Office. Yes, it did. And no matter how much you disagreed with the former president, Trump, there was an active reduction in illegal immigrations during his administration. It is completely out of control now. And why is this a bad thing? Well, because we're not designed to just have this massive influx of people when we don't have the tax money to support their medical needs, their educational needs. We see a lot of crime being committed at the border. We see cartels really controlling all of this. But that's what's going on here. And so drugs also are coming across. So this whole idea of illegal immigration has far less to do with who is coming than how it is happening and what the offshoots are. And the fentanyl is a massive offshoot, and we have about 300 fentanyl deaths a day in this country. You've heard people, maybe you haven't, compare it to a plane crash a day. If that were going on, you think we'd be kind of just accepting it? No. The drug cartels are controlling the southern border, and we aren't giving our side, the Border Patrol and Customs, we aren't giving them the tools that they need, the resources they need, or even the support that they need. And we've seen that. Now, I mentioned that there's been an uptick in media coverage. ABC's Martha Raddatz was down at the southern border to see for herself what's going on. And she had a sit-down interview with GOP Governor Greg Abbott. He's the Republican governor of Texas. And she made a statement that is really easy to say, huh? What'd you say? Listen to this very closely. Here's Martha Raddatz with Governor Abbott.
You talk about the border wall, you talk about open borders. I don't think I've ever heard President Biden say, we have an open border, come on over. But people I have heard say it are you, are former President Trump, or Ron DeSantis. That message reverberates in Mexico and beyond. So they do get the message that it is an open border, and smugglers use all those kinds of statements.
Okay. First things first. She's never heard Joe Biden say, we have an open border. And so the fact that the cartels are hearing that statement is the fault of Governor Abbott, former President Trump, and Ron DeSantis. It's your fault. They're getting the message. But hang on a little bit, because there are some receipts that we've got. Let's just flash back to September 12th, 2019, a Democrat debate. And here is exactly what Joe Biden said.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
We should surge the border, he said. And then recently, when he was making a trip to a border state, Arizona, he said he had more important things to do than to go visit the border. He was going to Arizona. He's going to be right there. And people want to say, oh, it's such you've got to get Secret Service. You've got to do all the preparation. Is it the best use of our resources? Well, you could say that about any trip that he makes. But we have a legitimate crisis on the southern border. And anyone who thinks it's anything less isn't looking at the same pictures I'm seeing. And these are not fake pictures. See, here's one of the scary things. I think people are so quick to be in denial because they think things are made up. Because we've been conditioned lately to not believe our eyes. We've been conditioned because some speech has in fact been suppressed. Articles have been suppressed. Journalism has been suppressed. We don't know who to trust, right? We don't know which resource to look to and say, well, boy, there it is. That's those are pictures. Because people are going to say, oh, that's old news. That's yesterday. That didn't happen recently. That's not going on. Exactly. Come on, man. It's happening. It's happening. So when you have a journalist like Martha Raddatz of ABC telling the governor of Texas, it's his message that's being amplified and not what we just heard Joe Biden say, not the come on man, but the other part about we should surge the border. I'll tell you what, it makes me really, really angry that this president, I get really mad when I watch the response from the White House. In fact, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre recently said, we take it very seriously. We are doing the work. This president has done the work. What work has he done? What work has he done? He's just reversed a bunch of laws. It allowed a bunch of people to come in. He's given complete power, really, to the drug cartels. What has he done? He hasn't done anything that's been productive.